Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Co-host Rich Gear here as well, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Jerry Bergman with us again. He's one of my favorite people, and he has every time I turn around, Jerry, you have at least a book or two to being published. Yeah, I think you're going fast. What's that?
I had almost 60 books published, and the last 6 have been in Arabic. So I'm sorry.
They have been. You write them almost faster than I can read them, and they are all so good and well documented and well footnoted. It's amazing what you do.
That's my life. I work on books pretty much all day now that I'm retired.
Yeah, that's sort of what I've been doing too. I've been working on updating my book, Revolution Against Evolution, and of course this TV show that keeps us busy because we have one every week, and so that usually takes about 2 days of editing to do that. So, but we're glad to have you on this show. There's a couple of your books that we've reviewed before, and I have them with me here. It's the one is Poor Design, and the other one is Useless Organs. And these are two kingpin arguments of evolution that you demolish in these books, and we thank you for doing that. I'll have to give the reference so that you can order it online.
So the folks out there can order. Yeah. Jerry, what I can't, like I say, I almost can't keep up with how fast you're writing it. And I want to read them because every one of them is just. Even though they're fairly detailed and they're just very interesting, very well written, and I like the way you write because you lay it out so almost inexorably. Like, oh man, if you don't know this is the way it is, there's no reason to be. There's no way we can reason with you. I mean, it's just amazing. So, what was the latest book you wrote?
Well, the one you have showed there is Useless Organs, which has been an argument brought up by Darwin originally in his 1859 book and his other book, of course, on human evolution. And he basically argued there must not be a designer because we're so poorly designed. We have, for example, lots of useless organs. They have no function. And he didn't call them vestigial organs, he called them rudimentary organs. And that argument has been used ever since. In fact, my grandson, who's taken biology at the high school level, his book, I looked at it recently, and it again had the same arguments, the useless organ argument, that indeed, how could there be a God that created us when we're so poorly created? And they mention the same things which have been refuted decades ago, the appendix, the tonsils, the adenoids, etc. They claim that one time there's 100 useless organs. In fact, the Encyclopedia Britannica states there's 100 useless organs in our body. Well, I show every one of them have a very important function. And in this useless organs book, I've been working on this, by the way, for about 50 years. So yeah, I can't read more and more arguments showing indeed that they have many, many uses, some that I wasn't even aware of a few years ago. In fact, I've extended this. I'm ready to do a revision because I found another 8 or 9 claims of useless organs that indeed are not useless. They're very important. If they're really useless, maybe we should just go to doctors and have them all taken out. Well, doctors know, by the way, and I taught anatomy for many years, and anatomy doesn't mention any vestigial organs because anatomists know there are no vestigial organs. And therefore, if you look at the index in anatomy books, the word vestigial is not there. And they explain, well, what the appendix does, what the tonsils do, what the thymus does, what the thyroid and so on does. All of these organs have very useful or very important functions. And it's just irresponsible to me to still argue that we have all these useless organs, which indeed was a major argument for evolutionists for decades. And their argument was, of course, evolution explains the useless organs, at least they try to, but God does not. So therefore, this is proof of evolution. This is one of the major evidences they used of evolution.
See, and we could, Darwin, even though he had a if you will, a religious argument to promote evolution, even though he tried to make it scientific, so to speak. But 150 years after he wrote his book, and knowing what we know, what you present and others have presented, and you say anatomists know, doctors know, it's then gone beyond the realm of any kind of science or medical fact. It has to do with philosophical arguments. Then it has to do with a propensity to hate biblical truth. I guess is the only thing I can think of.
Well, they wear evolution glasses and they see the world, including anatomy, through those evolution glasses. And those glasses distort reality. They need to take the glasses off and look at what is there, which anatomists, of course, have to do, and they've done quite well. And so therefore, anatomists recognize that these are not vestigial. They are indeed useful. In fact, some are very useful. And an anatomy book, I've never seen one, and I've looked at many. I had dozens when I was teaching that subject. And I've never seen one that claimed there are any vestigial organs. And the one we used at the college where I taught, they, of course, did not make the claim there are vestigial organs. So indeed, that's passé. In fact, some, like the appendix now, we know has 5 different functions. So it's not just one function, but 5 different functions. And there may be more.
Wow.
So in the Journal of Creation, you had an article just recently, evolutionary proof of poor intestine support is actually evidence for design.
Right.
And so they believe that the intestines that we have in our stomach
Poor design.
are evidence.
That's another one of your arguments against poor design.
Right. That's another book, and I deal with the major poor design claims, all of which are quite blatantly false. People ask me where I got this information from. Just go to medical library, which I did, and just look up the literature. The literature is very clear. So when the poor design claim is made, I just do a search, go to the medical library, look up the literature, and unequivocally every time many reasons are given that it's not poor design but good design. So the information's out there. I don't have to make it up. I don't have to do research. It's just there. I have to do research in the books. And of course, one argument which came out was that our intestinal support system is poorly designed because we have inguinal hernias. This struck me because I've had 2 inguinal hernias, just had surgery a few weeks ago for that problem, and so I'm very aware of it. My brother's had 3 surgeries for inguinal hernias, and the fact is that's primarily involved in males who are partially genetically caused, because this is my family, as I've mentioned, and it also is a result of not very responsible lifting. And I can vouch for my own case. I've lifted a lot of things there's no way I should have ever lifted. Very foolish to lift what I did, and I'm surprised I didn't have one of these hernias when I was 21, when I was working for a furniture company and we're building furniture, and I foolishly tried to lift up a desk which weighed, I don't know, about 2,000 pounds. It was an industrial built desk, and me and a couple other guys lifted it up and put it, and we crated it. It was in a wooden crate, which weighs more than that. A beautiful desk, huge desk, metal desk, and we lifted up and put it in the truck to ship it to the person who bought the desk. It's a custom-built desk. It's the only one that we built that way. And I think back, and there's no way I should have done that. That was foolish. But I did, and I'm working, trying to get it done, and they said the truck's got to be loaded, and okay, Bergman, let's get in the truck now. You finished the desk, you built it, and I built the crate for it, and we put it in the truck, and off it went. But I'm surprised I didn't have inguinal hernia a week after that, but I didn't. It took a few years. In fact, the first one I had, I was teaching, I was a professor at Bowling Green State University, and I had it. And then the last one was just recently. And the reason I had the last one was because, well, I didn't take care of myself. I'm lifting too many heavy books as part of it. And the second reason is the first one lasted, 40 years? Yeah. So the doctor said, that's pretty good, because the first one I had repaired, they didn't have the techniques they use now to repair it. Now they use a mesh, which is stronger. And the mesh, the doctor told me, will last longer than you'll ever live. So now they have a lot better system of doing it. But even for the poor system they did the first time, it lasted for about 40 years, I guess. So
you were probably lifting Timothy Clary's new book. That one's a tome. But anyway, you were talking in here about the guts sit upon a hodgepodge of internal parts, including in men the cavities, the whole of the body wall through which the scrotum and the nerves descend during the first year of our lives. And so their argument is that because we are walking upright now, our guts are sort of hanging down in a way that they weren't originally evolved to be, and so that's the poor design argument.
Right, that's the basic argument they use, and that's the same argument they use for the problems we have in back problems, and other what they call design flaws. But if you think about it, women rarely have inguinal hernias. In fact, I've never heard of one. It's possible, and I talked to the doctor about that, who does surgery on that problem. And he says he's never had a woman where he had to do that surgery. And well, women design is better because they have to carry a baby. And so their design is improved compared to us. We don't have the weight. We don't have to carry around a 9-pound baby plus the placenta and the umbilical cord and so on. So we don't need to carry that. So therefore, our support is not as strong. Well, it doesn't need to be. But the picture I have in the book, it's quite well designed and it's really quite strong. In fact, I'm surprised it's as strong as it is. Now, I have a genetic flaw, but people who don't can carry around huge amounts of weight and never have a problem. So there's several things that are involved, and I just happen to have both. As my brother did, he worked for a company where he had to carry a lot of heavy stuff around. So that's one reason he ended up with the problem. But it's well designed, but if you abuse the body, of course it's going to fail. It's like cars are well designed, but if you abuse the transmission, of course it'll fail. I have a friend who wanted to know what would happen when he was doing 30 miles an hour if you put the car in reverse, automatic transmission. And he found, and this was an older car, I guess, but he found it ruined the transmission. And he said, well, they designed it so that you can put it in reverse when you're doing 40. And I say, look, the engineers feel if you're driving a car, you have a license, you ought to know not to do something so stupid. And they don't design it for stupidity. They design it for rational people who have a license to drive a car. And so this is the same thing. God designed the body in a certain way, and he didn't design it so that we lift up 2,000-pound desks with, not the proper help. He designed it so that we lift what we need. I'm surprised that something else doesn't break when you lift up that much weight. I should mention that the inguinal hernia that some men have, that is a fail-safe system where that fails as opposed to something else. So in essence, it's like a fuse. A fuse blows when you have too much current, and therefore it protects the rest of the house so you don't burn the house down. So the inguinal hernia has a certain limit, and therefore it does bulge when you go beyond that limit, and that is a good reason. It's like a fuse. And so I've said several doctors, and that's in the literature, by the way, mention that as well. So when you talk about poor design, often people who talk about this are just not very well informed, and it's tragic that they say things that are so foolish.
Well, it's interesting. Solomon says, of the making of books, there is no end. And you know why? Because nobody reads the old books. That's the real problem. So you got to keep coming up with something, even some of the old arguments. We said some of this stuff's been disproved for like 100 years, and they still keep bringing it up. Ernst Haeckel comes to mind, but let alone the vestigial organ argument. But I watch it. My dad used to be a professional magician. And he said, people say, well, how do you do the trick? And he said, no, a magician never reveals their secrets. The reality is every secret you can find has been published in books, but nobody reads the books, so they don't know. People just believe the propaganda and what they see. And of course, the analogy is they're manipulating your eye for something that isn't real, and that's exactly what it seems like the Darwinists doing, the same thing, because nobody's reading the real science, the real arguments.
A good argument is a nicotine membrane, they say, is not a nicotine membrane, but it's actually a plica semiluminarius and not a nicotine membrane. And I found the correct explanation for what that did was in a journal in 1924. So we're not talking about a new research, we're talking about the correct answer as to what that does, the plica semiluminarius does in 1924. It's not a nicotine membrane. And that was argued such, Darwin and others argued that because they claim that basically is proof that we evolved from reptiles, which also have a nicotine membrane, which covers the eye when they fly in the air and are concerned with dust and so on. It's kind of like a windshield wiper. And it'd be nice to have, actually. I wish we did have it. Very handy organ, but it's not what they claim it is. It's it doesn't nictitate. It's a plica semiluminarius, which helps hold the eyeball into its proper place.
Oh.
And so the explanation evolutionists use is silly. But it's still in a number of books that I've seen in biology that claim to support evolution.
Well, it's interesting, the eyeball, the design of the eyeball with the muscles that work with it are really interesting, because there's the ones that go make it go back and forth and up and down. There's also one that rotates it as you tilt your head, so that the field of vision stays level.
Oh, yeah.
And so, there's a lot of things that are also redundancies in the design of life, because if we have one of these organs removed, there are other organ functions that seem to take over. Like if you remove the appendix, there's portions of the intestine that actually do some of the functions that the appendix are supposed to do. So there are things of that sort that we can point to in terms of that. It's sort of like having windshield wipers for your headlights on your Mercedes. It's not necessarily that you need some of these things, or you can do without them, but they're little extras that the Lord threw in there to do certain things that are kind of nice.
Now, Jerry, this may be side off the field a little bit. I'm just fascinated because you've written on some of the stuff called epigenetics.
Right.
And why is that not evolutionary? I'm giving you a softball question here in a way, but I think people can get confused because environment can work on the gene, and they think, well, isn't that evolution? Because it's not.
Epigenetics is built into our body, and it's built into our body to help us adjust to the environment. And therefore, it's not a result of evolution, it's a result of inborn design. As you talked about overdesign. Well, overdesign is obviously design, and therefore overdesign is evidence for designer. It's not evidence for evolution, because evolution, why would it evolve things that are only needed in certain rare cases? And so therefore, it's not a good argument for evolution. And the same thing with epigenetics. It helps us adapt, and we do have an enormous adaptability. And a common example is you move up to a mountain and stay there for a while. Well, your body adjusts to the different levels of oxygen. You have less oxygen, you have more carbon dioxide, and more especially on nitrogen, and therefore in those places, you need to be more effective in taking oxygen in. And our bodies adjust quite well to that. And so you have many systems which do adjust quite well because of epigenetics. Well, epigenetics, by the way, means above the genetics. And so epigenetics are ways that your body can literally turn on and turn off genes. And so it's a way of adjusting the genome, but it doesn't produce new genes. It simply regulates the genes that are there. And so again, it's evidence for design. It's not evidence for evolution, because we're not evolving anything new. It's already there. It's just a matter of turning things on and turning things off, like we do in our house. We have switches that turn lights on and turn them off. Well, that's not evidence for evolution. Of course, it's evidence for design. The house is designed so that you can turn the lights off when necessary and turn them on when necessary. And the light switches, of course, are in places where are convenient. So when you walk into a room, there's a light switch typically by the door. Therefore, you can turn it on and you can see when you go into the room. The same thing when you leave the room, you can turn it off just as you leave. And so this is evidence for good design, which of course argues for a designer, electrician, and therefore we see the same thing in epigenetics.
And this is really what Darwin's finches was all about, is their epigenetic changes that took place in the Galapagos.
In fact, they found when they'll bring some of these same birds on the Galapagos back over time, they'll become the same as regular of some of the finches over here. They will turn the switches. Their descendants will turn the switches off or turn them on or whatever needs to be done.
Because of epigenetics.
Yeah, that's epigenetics again.
And that's another example of over design. I'm told when I gave the transmission argument that some of the newer cars have a system where if you put it in reverse when you're doing 40 miles an hour, it will not go into reverse. So it's designed even for very stupid people, so you don't ruin your transmission. And so therefore, and I'm not sure which cars that have that design. I've never wanted to try it in my car. I figured I'd just assume it's there or not there and not try it.
In the Model T, they had a gas pedal for reverse as well as for going forward. And
Did they really?
yeah, they did. And so that's one of the things they teach about as a docent at the museum. But the right pedal is the brake, the middle pedal is reverse, and the left pedal is the clutch going forward.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes you see in the old movies they get them mixed up. Going back to
Next to a garage or something, yeah.
so that's kind of a fun fact. But this article that you have about the intestines, I remembered, I think it was from one of your old books, where there were actually people who, as a matter of routine, would take out the appendix.
That was, even when I was growing up, that was pretty common. When you were growing up, you're older than I am by a year.
Yeah, that was common. In fact, I understand some states had a law that said when you did abdominal surgery while you're in there, you've got to take out the appendix. And that was extremely common. Not only the appendix, but also the wisdom teeth. A lot of dentists say, well, let's get them out. Why? Well, because they'll cause you problems later on, so let's get them out now so they won't be a problem. And now, of course, they leave them in if they can. They only take them out if there's a really clear need. The same thing is true with the appendix. The same thing is true with tonsils. I had my tonsils out for no reason whatsoever, except the doctor said, well, let's get them out. And I was about 5, I guess, or 4, and I asked why. And the doctor said, well, you have them out when you're young, you have fewer problems. If you have them out when you're 30 or 40, there are more problems. So let's get them out now, because it will save you some problems later on. So he took them out for no reason at all, except, well, let's take them out for prophylactic reasons.
Yeah.
And now, of course, they don't do that, because now we realize that you need to have your tonsils, and they have a very important functions. They do take them out now if there really is clear problems, like you can't breathe. The tonsils get so large you can't breathe, so they have no choice. They have to take them out. But it's like anything else. They don't lop off an arm unless there's good reason.
Sure, it's like, well, it's like things like, you talk about the cure is going to kill you. It's like you temperatures to burn viruses out or bacteria or whatever's in your body. But if the temperature goes too high, it'll kill you. So they got to soak you in a bathtub full of ice or give you some kind of a drug to knock the temperature down. Even though that's designed to actually help kill the infection. That's the same thing with a tonsil. They will take them out, but only under really, it's got to be that high before they will do anything, you know?
Yeah. And as a result, the number of tonsillectomies has declined enormously. And when I did surveys among my students at the college, asked how many had their tonsils, just about everybody did. How many had their appendix? Everybody just about did. How many have their wisdom teeth? Almost everybody did. So, and these are students usually in my anatomy class, 20 and 25 as a whole. And therefore, I had a good sample. And you can see that the rate of taking out those organs has declined enormously, because now we know that they're not vestigial, they are very useful.
Yeah, I think it was in the 50s when I had my tonsils out, but I still have my appendix. You still have your appendix, Jerry?
Yes, I do.
All right, but I don't have my tonsils. How about you?
Yeah.
Yours are out. Oh, yeah, yours are out, yeah.
Tell me now, well, the reason you have this problem is because you had a tonsillectomy and you shouldn't have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I have my tonsils, my wisdom teeth, and my appendix. So I managed to escape.
You kept your wisdom teeth as well?
Yeah, I still have.
Oh, you're rare.
I still have my wise guys. About 5 years ago, I went in for something else and went to the periodontist, and he recommended, well, it's time to have these wisdom teeth out. Well, I started to question them, you know. First of all, I sort of went along with it. Yeah, I've had those for a long time, but you know, I didn't see a real need for it, and I went back to my regular dentist and I told him, you know, hey, what's going on here? Is this still the old school way of thinking? And
yep.
And so I kept my wisdom teeth, and you know, it just makes it a little bit more convenient for the lady who cleans my teeth, you know.
Oh, to have them out?
To have them out. That's really what it is, you know. But they haven't caused me any problems, and so I still have my wisdom teeth.
So Jerry, you were talking earlier, I don't know whether you have time, we got a few minutes left, but you got a controversial book coming out? Or
Yeah,
trying to
I
get it
have a
out?
book where I show that I've been in Methodist, in the Methodist Church for 30 some years. In fact, I'm a lay speaker in the Methodist Church, so I know the Methodist Church pretty well. And many are very supportive of my creation work. In fact, some of the best churches I've spoken are Methodist churches. But unfortunately, the leadership, the denomination, is very hostile to not only creation, but intelligent design. And when I did research on this, I found out that the Methodist Church separated because they wanted to retain the support for slavery. This was in the South primarily. And so they finally split because of this issue. The next issue was eugenics. They were very supportive of the eugenics movement. In fact, I have a number of cases in my book where I talk about this. And eugenics, of course, now is an embarrassment. And they openly, in churches, supported eugenics movement. I just have an article in Scientific American, which basically the eugenicists applauded the churches, the Methodist Church, because they supported this movement. And now that's an embarrassment. In fact, the Methodist Church apologized for supporting it, openly apologized. Well, unfortunately, they still support, many of the higher level officials still support evolution. In fact, the intelligent design people wanted to have a table in one of their meetings, their conference meetings, just a table and sell books on good design, that's all. Not on creation, evolution, that basically on how well designed the birds are and how well designed the earth is and so on. And the hierarchy said, nope, you can't have this booth. We're not allowed to have this booth. And so they were basically kept out of the conference and selling their videos, which I can't imagine are controversial for anybody. Wow. Recognized the birds are well designed, and I think one of them was on migration. That migration is quite a miracle. We don't really understand how it works. And so therefore, this was not really controversial among, I would say, 99% of all Methodists. But yet the hierarchy refused to give them a booth, even if they paid for it, to show their films and their books on this topic. And so this is to the extent that they have supported evolution. And also during the evolution trials, the Methodist bishops have over and over come along against the creation position and against just allowing teachers to discuss both sides of this issue. And so I think it'll be an embarrassment for the church as the evidence accumulates against the evolutionary worldview. Over and over. This is one reason they're losing membership. The Methodist Church has declined enormously. The church we go to is a fraction of what it used to be. And this is true with many Methodist churches. People realize this and they leave. And I think that's hurting the Methodist Church, and there's a lot of good people involved. And they should prevent this by being a step ahead and not a step behind as they were in the slavery issue and the eugenics issue. They should be a step ahead in the evolution issue, and I document quite clearly what they're opposing.
John Wesley would be rolling in his grave. John Wesley would be rolling in his grave.
He would be astounded because he was openly a creationist. Listen to many of his songs which he wrote. They're openly creationists. And he had no thought of supporting evolution or any ideas that belittled creation worldview.
Well, Jerry, we're only getting started, but I guess we're going to have to end. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.